Welcome everyone for our talk, from Kubestronaut to Production Hero. I am Pedro Célestin. This is my colleague David, and we are actually two members of the very first batch of Golden Kubestronauts, and we happen to have paths along the certifications on CNCF that are somehow similar and by other aspects different. And we are here to talk to you about how this landscape of certifications and study path applies to real-world problems and how does it really affect the real applications that we face in our daily lives. Unfortunately, I must warn you, we are not here to say there is a one-size-fits-all solution. There is no silver bullet, and I'm so sorry to tell you that, but that's exactly the opposite of what we are going to conclude here. And we are going to show you by telling you our stories and how different they are, that we might have some different opinions about certain subjects, and also that we must always have in mind the specific use case we are dealing with in order to see what is the best solution and what are the skills that are meaningful for each context, each professional context, each organizational context. We always have to keep in mind the ends to which we are leaning towards. So I am a principal SRE at CLDF, which is a government institution in Brazil. And in my case, we are running an on-premises mostly environment with lots of Kubernetes, as I will explain later. Meanwhile, David is from the Czech Republic, and he works at Wrike, and I will pass now to David to tell his story.
Thank you. So we would like to give you some brief overview of our backgrounds, and basically it should all boil down to for you to understand like what are our choices, how do we approach the certification path, how do we approach learning to those, and what is the connection to our production systems. So my background is like really 20 years ago. I was mostly a Java developer. I've transitioned from multiple different languages. I think that I'm at that level of like those professional musicians that can play multiple instruments and they really don't have any preferred one. So this is me as a developer. I had a brief 5-year managerial detour from it, and then I returned back to the infrastructure, which is, I think, currently the most challenging field that you can be in our world. So I've seen multiple cloud vendors. I have even some certifications from them, so I can even compare those to the CNCF versions. Typically, like already many years, we try to do everything in our infrastructure as a code through Terraform, Ansible, and some other tooling. I was used to have Zabbix, a monitoring system, which I'm very fond of, but maybe you have not heard about it. This is like a 20-year-old system. This should have been a successor probably to Nagios, and it is not Prometheus. Let me just maybe refrain to it. And already, like again, many years ago, we've discovered that the containers are not the worst part of the ecosystem, and probably they are even the best model how to package your application. So for me, entering those CNCF certifications a few years ago was that I was a really senior software engineer. You know, in 2022, we had a project. Basically, the gist of it is that it was like for a major vendor in the Czech and Slovak republics for retailer business. We needed to move our large PHP and Postgres application into something more than VMs. And basically, we were running on containers. We were having very nice Docker Compose files for the development and even for production. And we wanted to progress further. So I did a lot of research at the time. And basically, there were two competitors. One was Docker Swarm, and the second was Kubernetes. And the sign there says, no Kubernetes, go Docker Swarm in Russian, sorry. So this is what we've chosen. And the main reason for it at that time was that even though I tried to study a lot, I was not able to say like confidently, I am able to fix Kubernetes when it breaks. I'm probably very much able to fix Docker Swarm because it is so much easier for me to administer. Of course, not to mention that there was nobody to reach out for help. The Czech Republic is a little bit behind with it. So let's do some research, right? I personally like to read, so this is the first book that I got, of course, for the production of Kubernetes, which I was not running at the time. But I've started small with this one cluster, then I've traveled through multiple clusters that were just for staging and such purposes to the production. And I've understood one thing. Kubernetes itself won't solve all your infrastructure, right? So you need much more books if you would like to have it production ready. Well, we've discovered early on that there is something called like GitOps. There are some tools that can help implement you, right? And we've come to a conclusion that even our monitoring system maybe needs some adjustments. I mean, adjustment of a type that we should get rid of it and we should start with something completely new. And the more I learn about it, I bought even more books. These are the pictures of my cellar, so I'm probably not supposed to show my cellar, but here it is. The thing that I would like to present here that it is not about, one-time decision. We've really, for us and for me personally, this was like an ecosystem shift from the VMs and the tooling that was around it to something completely different. And in order, so I could confidently say to my company and to my colleagues, hey guys, let's move on to the new thing. I really need to cover all the connections that are around. So I've tried to read. I've onboarded some of my colleagues back then. The first certification that I did was the CKA, Certified Kubernetes Administrator. And I can tell you that I failed on the simulator. Probably this is very common. And for me, the major reason for it was that I was not very fluent with kubectl. I've GitOps everything at a time, so everything I did, I basically committed to Git, clicked, synced, in the Argo CD, and waited for things to happen. Kubectl, something was thing that I've read somewhere in the book that I should not do, so I was not very fluent with it. But the certification kind of requires it. So the first one was, for me, at least about the speed or the debugging that I can do. So I would be much more fluent, and I could, without Argo CDing or something like this, could use kubectl efficiently. And the second one was CKS, Certified Kubernetes Specialist. This was fun, to be honest, because there were a lot of more details. It was very practical to me. Even with this, in the side of the certification, you could use multiple tools, which was, again, very friendly to me, I would say. So I started with the Kubernetes alongside my real projects. This is very important note. It was not something I would do as a hobby, not something that I would just hit somewhere in my pocket. Those were the real projects. I wanted to solve very specific problems I had at the time. And when I was done with it, I didn't need to discover or research much further. I had a patient team around me because, once you come with those different ideas and, hey, you guys, let's start Prometheus today, and such, they really need to be patient, not to throw you away from the door or worse, windows. We in the Czech Republic, we have a strong history with throwing people out of the window. So really having the time and some, let's say, safe ground that you can experiment on is extremely important for the learning process. It was time consuming, but of course I've learned a lot. And typically, if it was possible, at least up to some point, I tried to take one small change at a time. Sometimes it was not possible, especially, for example, I have a very not maybe bad memories, but it was very intensive to transfer your imperative SSHing into something called Argo CD, and even it was for a very long time very scary to me to keep autosync on there, for example. So if I would tell you how do I prepare for the certifications, typically it should be up to some point aligned with what I do, really. I would like to see some practical connection between the certification and what can give it to me. Having that certification somewhere, as a badge or somewhere in the resume is not that important to me, unfortunately, maybe. And I would like to typically dedicate something like 2 to maybe more man days for this studying. I prefer to study from the manuals. I prefer to have some hands-on so I can really understand, okay, this technology will require these amount of things and it won't be that easy as some of the vendors might say. So especially if you've seen Backstage, for example, and I'm not a JavaScript guy, this is exactly what I'm talking about, because going through the examples, studying it, understanding how complex it is was very beneficial to me. I am certified Backstage associate, but I would not suggest to run it personally because I don't have that kind of experience. On the other hand, I can name maybe Kyverno certification again, which was very practical to me, and I could link those precise things I wanted to have checked in my cluster with that certification, which was entertaining. Yeah, and at one point in time, I got 6 certifications, and then the validity of the certs have changed. So I said to myself, okay, I won't get those 2 years of validity. I would like to have 3 years. So I've collected 4 more. And then once I had 10, those 3 that remained, that were new at the time, basically, again, very, very aligned to what I did. So it was OTel, Backstage, and Kyverno back then. So I got them all. Passing to Pedro.
Nice, thank you very much. Let me just sit on this side right now. Well, my path is a little different from David's. At the first moment, I was working with quality assurance, QA, in the Bank of Brazil, which is a very, very large enterprise. Perhaps one of the biggest banks in Latin America. And because of that, I am talking about an organization with very strict processes around IT also, with lots of squads that must attain to certain standards. And there in Bank of Brazil, I happened to have the opportunity to be responsible for doing all the non-functional testing on a very, very critical application that was being developed there. And that application happens to be the first large application on top of Kubernetes that would go into production, which is very mission critical. The name of the application is PIX. In Portuguese, we call it Pix. And Pix is actually, it was a groundbreaking instant payment system for interbanking. So it was a project with a specification by the Central Bank of Brazil, and all the banks had to implement that payment system that was really innovative at that moment. So this system was developed in a microservices architecture on top of Kubernetes, and I'm talking something around 2017, so I'm not talking about Kubernetes as mature and as widely spread as it is today. And also I'm talking about an industry, which is the financial industry, which tends to be a little more classical about the tech stack they use than other industries. And with that responsibility, I was not in place to decide whether to use Kubernetes or all of that. That was a premise at the role I was into, but by having to check how performant the service were inside of Kubernetes, I had to understand a lot of its architecture, of how it works and everything, and I helped solve many bottlenecks that were present in that moment. And then after that, I had the opportunity to lead a development team, and then I was in a different role. My team actually had to develop the new service on top of Kubernetes because of some standards from the organization. But it was a very different kind of system. It was a test orchestration system. At that moment, there was no such easy solutions to test mobile apps such as there is today, and we had to test the banking app that our customers would use with different Android versions and all that, and include those tests automatically inside the CI/CD pipeline. So the system that my team developed at that moment was mainly for orchestrating those tests on top of Kubernetes by using ephemeral infrastructure in a way that it would spread a fleet of Android simulators on top of Kubernetes. In order to do that, we also had to do some very small contributions to the Android open source code in order to make just a few adjustments right in order to run all that. And it was a success. At that moment, we had an internal solution which was very good, and I could say that that gave a great competitive advantage to the organization. But after that, I went to the organization where I am today, CLDF. And I got an enormous mission. I got to an organization where the IT was not very modern. People were struggling with some legacy infrastructure. It was mainly based on Windows Server VMs. And up to that moment, that architecture was solving the problem that the organization had. However, that was the moment when the organization decided, from a strategic point of view, to make an enormous digital transformation. In that way, that infrastructure, those processes would not be enough to deliver the business value that was being expected by the high administration. And I got the place with the mission to do whatever was necessary. That is what they told me. Do whatever is necessary to prepare our infrastructure, our environment, the people's skills and all that, in order to deliver what we need to do, which is to tenfold the number of services we have in production, to start dealing here with mission critical services, which is something that they didn't do before that moment and all that. So we had to, at that moment, implement several things around technology, processes, and people's skills. We had to develop DevOps processes. We had to develop automation, CI/CD. We had to develop the skills for people to, for example, deploy a service to production without downtime. That's something they weren't used to do before. So because of the scale that was already a premise, Kubernetes made a lot of sense in that situation, because I was not talking about some very small environment where, for example, serverless service would suffice for some time. No, it was already expected to have some scale and also to be on premises. So I got the time to craft all the underlying infrastructure and prepare everything for this transformation. And well, okay, I had previous experience with Kubernetes, but not in this same role. And this is something interesting, because when we are talking about Kubernetes and all this tech stack, the skills that we develop, the skills that we need, those depend also on which role we are into. In the case you are responsible, for example, for observability, you will have some focus. In the case you are responsible for platform engineering, for example, you have a different focus. And when you are in large corporations, it is more common to have a more specific role. Meanwhile, in smaller organizations, it is more common to have a wider spectrum of acting. So I was in this very wide spectrum of what I had to do, and I had to prepare the ground and then bring the team together and say, okay, people, now we are working this way. Now we are going to develop like a training path for everyone and all that. It was a successful path, I could say. At the end of the day, nowadays, like 90-ish% of the services are already on top of containers. They are very stable, and the scalability that was being expected has been fulfilled. But getting to this point took lots of effort, took a lot of learning. So it was important to try to stay small at the first moment, to fail in smaller environments with less risk and all that. And these are lessons that come from lean startups approaches, and we must use them when we get to production. We have to take account of the risks that we are taking and understand how skilled we are, how resourceful we are to take the risks when dealing with production. And CNCF certifications were really like a path for me to go through all this learning that I had to go in order to fulfill my mission. In a way that there are lots of information. If you come here to KubeCon, for example, without a clear path, you don't know where to start. You don't know which sessions you should attend. At the same time, there are 15-ish sessions talking about great themes, and you say, oh, okay, which one should I get into? And having that plan, having a clear path, and saying, okay, let me start here, then go here, then go here, then this is good. And for me, the certifications path was this. It was a way to go through all of those, and to, at the end of the day, when studying for one certification, understand, oh, I could do this with this technology that I didn't know before. So it was really helpful, but it was inside a context with a real-world application. It was not just theoretical. It was not about ego or anything like that. So, okay. Another thing is that why CNCF certifications? Why not some else certifications? And I personally am a very advocate for CNCF technologies because first of all, I deal with government, and in government we have some peculiarities. First of all, it's very, very complex to procure enterprise solutions. In that way, if I happen to only try to use enterprise solutions, I wouldn't be able to innovate. That's the truth, because my cycle of purchasing some license would be so long that I wouldn't be able to deliver the value that it's expected by the high administration. Okay, let's use open source. Okay, but if I just decide to use some open source and go randomly with that, I might fall for the risk of going into some project that suddenly closes its doors and closes its license. And it may happen. But when I go choose projects that are hosted inside organizations such as CNCF, but that's not the only one, who are very compromised of keeping that project alive, keeping the source open, keeping security vulnerabilities always mitigated through actions, trying to keep the software secure and all that. That gives us much more confidence to go to this path in our risk management analysis. And that's why I think CNCF has a major role to several organizations worldwide. And in that way, in my role, I think it has been very, very meaningful to be always up to date with the CNCF initiatives, because I really come here to KubeCon, I see new initiatives, I see new projects, I see new updates, and I know they will be useful for our real-world scenarios and problems. So, just one quick reminder, Kubernetes has a cost that is not only in terms of infrastructure, but also in terms of people, of skills and time. And because of that, I would not recommend, for example, going straight into Kubernetes if you are like a startup just being founded right now. Start small, start with serverless and all that, but from some point on, it might really make sense. Kubernetes needs a certain fixed structure of the control planes and all that to work, and this has a fixed cost. It must be remembered this. But actually, Kubernetes is essential for scaling. For example, why did Google create more Kubernetes? It was because they had a scaling issue. At that moment, there was no tool available for scaling the services they needed. So Kubernetes is naturally a great option when you have very high scalable solutions, when you have the requirements to scale up in very large areas. So it's important to take account the context you are into. And also, Kubernetes helps a lot with CSP agnostic provisioning when you want not to be with a lock-in with one certain cloud service provider, which might be a necessity for your organization or not, but it is something to take into account. So I did firstly the CKA and then the CKS, very similar to what Dave did. And along the way, within the scope of real projects, I have learned a lot. And I was privileged, I could say, to have the space to research prior to put things into production. I was able to test things in staging environments and all that, to fail chip through the organization, and then only getting into production after really understanding, made all the adjustments needed for the environment as a whole. But I could say that there are some stressful situations in Kubernetes, such as handling persistent data. For a long time, people were only comfortable using Kubernetes for stateless applications, and it's more recent to use Kubernetes for stateful workloads. So I recommend great care when dealing with persistence in Kubernetes, not to lose your data. Use, for example, retain on delete PVCs for critical volumes, stuff like that. And dealing with CSI on premises might also be challenging due to integrations with storages and other platforms. Also, you have network complexity sometimes. One personal example was dealing with BGP peering, because I'm dealing with on-premises environments. So there was some issues that required further knowledge on several topics. And each certification study approach got to make evolutions in environment as studying to all the certification aligning particular text to real use cases. Remember, certification is not an end by itself. This is I think, the most important message. It is helpful, but it is not an end by itself. And try always to get certifications that are aligned to your role or to what are your challenges at that moment. And please.
So as I hear you pitching Kubernetes, I think that we are on the wrong floor. We should be down there selling the thing.
Yeah.
So just maybe a remark, what do we share in our past? We've all seen some benefits of the certification. So we are in the Golden Kubestronaut, first batch, first thing. We seen those projects in real life, out of the wild, and we've seen also the bad things that they have, the bugs they have and such, but still it was a learning path for us. I think that from the start we had a bit of a different conclusions, meaning that I'm not that personally caring what tool I use. I think that the Kubernetes currently is the best what you can do for my use cases. Maybe people have a better or more, how to say it, a gentle approach to selecting your tooling based on your organization needs, which is completely fine. Common themes that you may heard along our explanation. It was very time consuming, right? sorry to tell you about this one. Nobody would like to hear it. There are people who would just sell you the secret sauce somewhere from below, so you are done with it. It's not that thing. Certifications were aligned to what we did, to our real projects. If they are not, they don't have the value. At least for me, it is so. Practical learning comes with like doing the hands-on on the things, with reading the manual. If you would like to have some shortcut, somebody else's notes, how did they pass the certification, next day you won't remember a thing. It's not beneficial, at least for me. Again, I wouldn't recommend something like this. And achieving the certification is not important. We cannot emphasize it much, I would say. So our study path did touch CKA, Kubernetes Administrator, then progressed to Kubernetes Security Specialist. I think that this is a bit of advanced. If you have the background as we did, maybe it's a good track for you. For me personally, it was a challenge. I hope also for you. So this is why I started with this one and not like progressed from some maybe lower levels ones. If you are more like a junior, I would suggest to start with the CKAD, application developer one, and then progress to the Kubernetes administrator. But still, you know, on the right side, there is some like screenshot of roadmap that is suggested for Kubernetes. And if you would zoom in, you know, every box there takes you 1 month, 1 week at least of studying if you are like very efficient and don't have a regular job. And by the way, it does not end there, you know. So in the end, there is like advanced topics and the like roster ends there. So really, it can be like very challenging not to overwhelm yourself, because if you would like to debug a request to the Kube API server, if you would like to follow the trails of the problems, you will hit so many layers of the unknown if you start that it's just, you cannot get it right for the first time. So I would consider everything as a black box up to some point. Let's try to focus on this particular layer, get it right, understand what it is, how can it be configurable, what can be helpful about it, and then move on. If this is aligned with your project that you are currently doing, this is the wonderful thing. So the certifications also provide something as a strength to them, right? So I would say that the CKA Administrator, CKA Security Specialist, and also the Istio Certificate Associate, because it has some hands-on, they are a strong, let's say, support in your resume if you apply for a job. Personally, if I see a candidate with these, I say, okay, they know a thing about Kubernetes, like checkbox checked. For the associate level ones, but typically, especially for those that are like multiple choice questions, I don't have this checkbox checked by default. And I think that they are mostly for you to have some progress, force you, or maybe with the certification deadline to study and such. If there, in the future, if there are more coming on the like professional and higher tiers, I would be personally very glad, because this would definitely help me like to filter those resumes and just select the people that already like invested a lot of time in those, and having some like stamp that, you know, independent one, that they can do it, they know what the container isolation level is and such. I would just gladly take it. But currently, only these typically are like worthwhile, I would say, for the interview. So sorry, no silver bullets, no shortcuts, no secret sauces, or how do you call it? We've just maybe tried to assemble some like qualities of what you can get. So you can take maybe today, just like right now, the multiple choice certification test, and you can pass, right? Is there any benefit for you? I don't think so. If you have some theoretical use case knowledge, it is significantly better, but still, if you don't have the hands-on, if it is not aligned with the problems that you see, this is still limited. So I would really suggest to like follow this way through for all the certifications you do, because this is when you will get the most benefit. Also, if you are currently not in a company that is able maybe to have these technologies, you can be the one to introduce them up to some point. It's not easy, I can tell you, it's very time consuming, and maybe some people will oppose you. It can happen. You can maybe switch some of the projects that you do. You can maybe do some other projects in the company, or maybe you can help out in the community. And I can tell you that inside of the community, a lot of work needs to be done, and typically in the CNCF ecosystem, they are aligned with the CNCF certifications and technologies. So these are some suggestions that we can do so you can start up.
Great.
So that's all what we had. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, people.